Hello guys, it's Dre2584. As you can see, I didn't include the intro for this video. That's because this is a part 2 for a video I released earlier this month. So this video won't have an outro either. I'll be talking more about the unusual ways in which my brain connects things due to my neurological disorder. I originally planned on doing this video in just one part, but I thought of some more interesting neurological connections I have after I already uploaded the first part. The link to part 1 is in the description down below. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you watch it before you watch this part. Before we start, let's summarize part 1. For most of the video, I talked about how my sensitivity, particularly to foul language and screaming and crying kids, connects to things that are unrelated in my mind. Then I talked about one food-related neurological connection I have related to something I had trouble with years ago, which has caused me pressure more recently. Then I went over something that attracts me in an excessive and unhealthy way. For some new information, I will start with another atypical neurological connection I have relating to foul language as well as screaming and crying kids. You may think that if I'm dealing with either of those things while I'm around someone who knows how I feel about it, I would be less stressed out by it. But actually, it's oftentimes rather the opposite. I've realized that when I'm in the presence of someone that knows something is a common trigger for me, I may worry about it happening more. My paternal grandmother is intelligent, so I first told her about this to see if she could figure out why that is, and she had trouble figuring it out herself. But eventually, I was able to figure it out. My father told me that when someone curses when I'm around him, it'll actually affect him similarly to how it can affect me, because he's thinking about how I feel. So basically, when I'm around him or with anyone who knows me, I'm thinking about them feeling worried because of me being worried, which causes me to stress even more. You know how I mentioned in the other part of this video how certain songs or parts of songs have connections with things that can trigger me, or incidents at times that something triggered me? Something I didn't mention is that some of those songs are actually short tunes that my head randomly made up. And there is one that is a song I actually made, and I'll talk about it now. There is a part of a specific song that brings up a time I was very sad about something terrible happening to a friend of mine, where someone on YouTube was giving him depression by doing something awful to him. I released my song, Dance to the Fancy, on April 10th, 2021, and the end of the song has the song's repeated melody played on a mellow piano. The day of the incident I previously mentioned happened on what was my worst day of 2021, and that day was October 21st. The part of my song I was talking about not only brought me back to the horrible memory I was talking about, but it also created a visual that my mind created. It had a pink sky with stars and a crescent moon as the end of my song was playing in my head, and then the visual changed to the profile picture of that YouTuber, which made my friend depressed. This whole connection actually caused me to have even stronger negative feelings towards October 21st, 2021 than I already had. This day also caused me to have a neurological connection with something else. When my online friend reminded me what was happening to him and how critically it was affecting him mentally, he started off by switching the topic from something else while I was talking to him by writing "also" with a comma. This gave "also" with a comma at the beginning of a text message a negative connotation for me. Now whenever I see someone write something I don't like in a text message, it can actually bother me even more if it starts with that, especially if it comes from that friend. In fact, when I'm writing, I'll avoid using that use of punctuation for that reason. So for example, I'll usually write, "I also wanted to say this," instead of "also I wanted to say this." The next neurological connection I have that I'd like to mention is something I've had trouble with a few times more recently. It's how when I feel good about something I took a leap in the right direction with, if something happens that upsets me shortly afterwards, even if it's completely unrelated to that thing, I might have anxiety that the thing that upset me is going to push me back in the wrong direction with whatever thing that was. This caused me to have a very bad problem one day this year. On the first Friday of February this year, I was in a good mood because I felt the most freedom I have felt in over a month with something I was struggling with. But later that day, my school went into a shelter in place that had to do with a fight that occurred at my school. After about 30 minutes of waiting for it to end, I got frustrated and anxious because I felt like it was going to mess up our plans of doing something we regularly did at school once a week. Eventually, I was deeply distressed because I thought that it was going to make me go backwards in how I wanted to overcome the feelings I was having with something else, even though what originally made me upset had nothing to do with it. My parents were confused and concerned about this. If I were to guess, I'd say my brain connected the two things like that because if someone is worrying about something all the time and they have another problem, it could easily bring that thing up in their heads. I learned a lesson from that day that it was another atypical connection my neurons had that I was taking too much into. One more atypical neurological connection I'm going to tell you about is related to decision making. Being indecisive with minor everyday choices is a common trait that people have, but in my case, it's oftentimes a deeper thing than that of a typical person. I have the habit of overthinking what I want to eat or drink. Most people would decide on what they were most leaning towards, but I tend to think like a mathematician by considering things like what ingredients the food or drink I'm ordering have, which I haven't had in the longest amount of time. Another thing that I've had a hard time deciding with before is playing music. What I would do oftentimes when I was putting a Spotify playlist on is I would analyze multiple things to figure out which playlist I should put on, so it would be comparable to being the person who was in charge of the lineup for a baseball game. This gave me a difficult time with deciding the right playlist. I'm working on this connection. What's helping is that when I'm making a decision that isn't particularly important, I try to just pick what I was thinking about rather than stressing myself out by thinking too much into it. As I said in the first video, a neurological connection is when your brain repeatedly reacts to something a certain way to the point where it becomes a natural reaction. And because of my autism, the connection to my brain are different than that of someone who is more typical, and some of them can be difficult to fully comprehend. By the way, I have a goal for YouTube I was planning on doing. I have had many ideas of overview videos, but I haven't created the video ideas. This is probably because when I don't have a fixed plan on a video and a time I'm going to get it done by, it might never get done. So to make up for my decreased YouTube activity this year, I will make the goal to dedicate the month of July to all overview videos, with one uploaded each week. By the way, something that I'm not sure if any of you noticed is that the first 8 videos I uploaded on my channel this calendar year were one of each type of the 8 videos I post on my channel. This was done somewhat intentionally. I haven't exactly decided which overview videos I was going to make in July, but you'll find out when they come. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Remember that there will be no outro, and I explained why at the start. Bye everyone.